Hello everybody, MechFrog here. In the continuing effort to expose the world to all the fun that Battletech has to offer, today's video is devoted to some cool melee weapons you could add to your battle mechs to spice up your tabletop play. All of today's items are found within the BattleMech Advanced Unit and Equipment Sourcebook and the BattleMech Manual. If you're looking for more neat gear, those are the books you want to wine and dine. Before we get started, today's sponsor is near and dear to my heart. Are you a fan of the Hatchet Man, but the thought of using an axe has lost its razzle-dazzle? Do you need to kick up things up a notch with your Berserker? Are you still unironically upset that the mech called the Woodsman doesn't carry an axe? Well, your friends down at Rosie's BattleMech Reclaimed and Repurposed Emporium can help you out. They have all the latest gadgets and even the hard-to-find antique actuator you can't find anywhere else. If you're in the market to offload that junker catapult you just inherited, or you need some quick cash to cover Solaris bets, we'll always offer competitive prices and a convenient pawning percentage on future sales. Just tell them Rosie sent ya. Search for Rosie's R&R and you'll be sure to find us. We're probably closer than you think. Our first weapon we need to talk about are claws. Besides making your mech look like it would enjoy spending 10 unsupervised minutes in the ball pit placed in an empty convention hall, these melee weapons can be quite nasty should your mech be caught up in physical combat. First officially introduced by the Lyran Alliance in 3060, the BattleMech Claws are specially designed hand actuators that enhance the slashing movement one can use to rip armor in a very effective manner. One of the earliest mechs known to utilize claws is the Mantis, a Solaris 7 mech equipped with not just one but two claws made from tungsten-reinforced composites. The mech's ranged weapons were all mounted in the torsos so the mech could always be free to use its claws, or at least gesture threateningly with them from a distance. All available evidence suggests the claws were quite successful in use and as a deterrent from getting into melee range. If you want to install one on your mech, it's going to weigh 1 ton and occupy one arm critical location for each 15 tons of the mech's weight. It replaces the hand actuator but still requires that lower and upper arm actuator. Claw attacks use a standard punching rule set except for a +1 to hit modifier as a result of the claw's mass and impact on a mech's balance. If a mech with a claw does make a successful attack, it does 1 point of damage for every 7 tons that a mech weighs, rounded up. Normally, a punch will do 1 point of damage for every 10 tons the mech weighs. For those of you who aren't able to rattle off every rule from the compendium faster than you can remember your kid's birth date. Additionally, if your mech is running triple strength Myarmor, this damage may be modified further. A downside to having claws is that it makes lifting objects slightly more difficult with a +2 modifier to your piloting skill roll. For very fragile objects like people or the egos of YouTubers, an additional +1 is added on top of that. A failed roll destroys the object. Sorry, Grandma. Mistakes were made. The next fun advanced melee weapon we have to talk about tonight is the Lance. Developed in the early 3060s by the Lyran Alliance, the mech-sized facsimile of a pointed weapon similar to a stiletto, this Lance is designed to penetrate armor rather than just smash or cut like a mace or an axe. It requires skill and a significant amount of practice in order to use it successfully, and this made it a less than popular choice, though it did see some success in various Solaris leagues. It functions in-game much like a hatchet, though it does have a +1 to hit modifier and does 1 damage for every 5 tons of the attacker's weight. The really fun part about the Lance can trigger after you record that initial damage. If there is any armor left on the section you just hit, the attacker gets to roll a 2d6. On a roll of 10 or higher, the Lance penetrates the target's armor and does 1 point of internal damage. You might say, well, 1 point of internal damage isn't that great, and you might be right, except that it also triggers an opportunity to roll for a critical hit with a -2 modifier to the roll. Now that could be a big game changer if the dice rolls go the attacker's way. For example, our longbow here has had the misfortune of being cornered and attacked by the Hatchetman, which has replaced its hatchet with a Lance. It rolls a successful attack on the right torso. The Lance does its 9 damage, the outer armor is normal, and with a roll of 11 on a 2d6, it does 1 additional damage to the longbow's internal structure. With the advantage of a -2 on the critical hit roll, the Hatchetman ends up getting 1 critical hit on the internal structure. Since the longbow only has 3 items in its right torso, an LRM-5 and 2 tons of LRM-20 ammo, there's a 2/3 chance that longbow is not long for this world. Shall we roll and find out? Well, I hope the longbow's mech warrior has paid up his or her life insurance. If you want to mount a lance on your mech, it's going to run you 1 ton and takes up 1 critical slot in the arm for every 20 tons the mech weighs. It doesn't require a mech have a hand actuator, but it does need both the lower and upper arm actuators. Moving on to our next fun melee weapon, which will really reach out and grab you. A Battlemech's chain whip uses a combination of reinforced metal chain and myomer cables to create a weapon that can whip around its target and then become firm, allowing the attacking mech to hang onto or grapple another mech. It can even pull an opposing mech off balance and trigger a fall with a failed piloting skill roll. Here's how it breaks down. The chain whip uses the same rules as a sword, except that the damage is not impacted by the weight of the attacking mech or by the use of triple strength myomer, but that's another topic. The whip takes up 3 tons of weight and occupies 2 arm critical slots. Due to the fact that physics is a thing, the whip itself only does about 1 damage, as per Total War rules for swords minus the weight modifier, which is pretty lackluster, but the trade-off is that depending upon where the whip impacts, it can provide the attacker with an additional roll for effect. If it impacts the arm, an attacker can attempt to grapple the target, preventing either mech from moving from their current hexes in the following turn. This could have all sorts of useful applications in a game, including slowing down troublesome fast mechs or allowing allies to get behind bigger targets and shoot that sweet back armor. The grapple effect is determined through an additional roll following the original, with a -1 modifier if the attacking mech outweighs the target mech and a +1 if it's the other way around. It does have to be noted that both mechs can still make physical attacks during that next turn, with both receiving a -2 to hit modifier on those attack rolls. If the attacker hits a leg with the chain whip, the attacker may attempt to pull the target off balance and force a piloting skill check. After a successful hit, the attacker rolls again with a -2 modifier if done in the same attack phase. If this second roll is successful, the targeted mech must make a piloting skill roll with a +3 modifier to prevent falling and possibly taking damage. All in all, the chain whip could be a useful weapon in a very selective circumstance. Now, I want to take a minute to discuss the web of nonsense I had to traverse in order to sort out what the chain whip does. It's useful because I think there's an opportunity here for Catalyst to streamline some of these rulebooks that have gotten a little convoluted. In the Tactical Ops sourcebook, the rules for the chain whip read, "The chain whip delivers its attack using the same rules as the Battletech sword." See page 146 and 147 in the Total War sourcebook. Going to Total War to try to sort it out, the section on the mech sword outlines the 2-hit roll rule and describes the sword damage as 1 per 10 tons of attacking mech +1. So now going back to the Tactical Ops sourcebook, the chain whip section goes on to say that the whip's damage does not include the 1 per ton portion of that rule. Okay, so it means the chain whip does 1 damage. Would it really have been so difficult to write the chain whip does 1 damage? You sent the player to an entirely different sourcebook, which they may not even own, to find out that the mech only uses 1 piece of another rule? This is excessively convoluted, and it feels like I'm back trying to learn 40k rules. I need a drink. Alright, I'm back. The last neat piece of melee gear I want to highlight for this video today is the mech vibroblade. Fans of Battletech lore and players of the MechWarrior TTRPG will know the vibroblade is a bladed weapon that uses a power pack to vibrate at such a high speed that it allows it to cut quickly through almost anything. A mech vibroblade operates on a similar principle, just at a much larger scale. The BattleMech manual states that there are 3 sizes of mech vibroblade, a small, medium, and large, and that they do 7, 10, and 14 damage respectively when turned on. This is considerably more damage than a standard mech sword would give, but there is an issue with heat generation, which builds 3, 5, and 7 heat depending on the blade size each time it is used while turned on, even if the swing doesn't connect with the target. The vibroblade can be used while turned off, which just reverts the rules to a standard sword rules with 1 point of damage per 10 tons, rounded up, +1. Either on or off, the vibroblade has a -2 to hit modifier on the roll. Depending on the mech, the vibroblade could be a considerable force multiplier. A 30-ton mech could normally do 4 damage with a sword, but with a small vibroblade, it could do 7, nearly doubling the impact. If you want to equip a mech with a vibroblade, the small version will run you 3 tons and take up 1 critical location on the arm, A medium blade is 5 tons and takes up 2 spots, and finally the large is 7 tons and takes 4 critical spots. So with that, I think we're going to call it good. Going through these source books can be intensely frustrating, as many of them aren't written with clarity in mind. I hope that as Catalyst moves forward with future source books, some of these archaic and poorly explained pieces of equipment and weapons can get refreshed a little bit so that everyone can incorporate them into the game without a headache. If you have a favorite melee weapon that you have used to great effect in a game, let me know about it in the comment sections below. Thanks as always for watching. I put a lot of time and effort into these videos in hope of boosting the Battletech community presence on YouTube, and you're a key part of that process. I appreciate it. Now go out and make that world a slightly better place today and tomorrow.